Okay, so about 3 years ago, I went on holiday with my boyfriend and his family. It was lovely. Long hot days on the beach, exploring the cities and swimming in the ocean. But I'm thinking of one particular night. My boyfriend and I had hung out with his stepsister most of the holiday. She's a year younger than us and likes getting drunk. And despite the fact that she annoyed us by following us all the time, we still would hang out with her. So, this one night, she says that we should go and find a club. I state that me nor her are old enough. Only my boyfriend could get in. But nonetheless, we are all walking to the other side of the island to get to this club. We're all pretty drunk. I fell over several times along the journey. So, we finally get to this club and we see all the people leaving it. We didn't realize that it was around 2 a.m. and it looked like the club was shut. A bit disappointed, we looked to a McDonald's and suggested that we refuel there. I go inside and order, but tell my boyfriend and his stepsister that I need some air, and I go outside for a cigarette. I'm smoking when a black car pulls up into the taxi space on the road. I have the idea that we might as well get a taxi back. I'm hurting from falling down and I'm pretty drunk. How much for a taxi to our hotel? I ask him. €10, he replies. Now the problem was, I only had €5. I said to this man, please, will you drive us for 5? We're from the UK and we don't know this area very well. So the man says, for you, €5. My boyfriend and his stepsister come out of McDonald's with the food, and they see me talking to this man. I tell them that he's a taxi man and that he's taking us back. The taxi man is surprised to see them, and says that he didn't know that I was with friends, but come on in and hop in. We were all about to get in the car, me and the stepsister in the back and the boyfriend in the front, when the man requests that I sit in the front. I had wanted to sit in the front anyway, and me being very drunk and stupid. Please forgive my lack of intelligence in this story. I decide to just comply and go in the front, despite my boyfriend's protest. So, for the first part of the journey, everything's good. We're all chaffing and laughing together, and the taxi man is joining in. We have music on the radio, and I'm looking out the window at the wonderful ocean side views. Plus, the cool air is nice on my hot, drunken face. We all continue chatting away, and the taxi man is being friendly, asking me questions about the UK and just really making conversation. We all start laughing and chatting away again, and he takes my hand, his right hand on the wheel. Bear in mind, this man is probably about 50, very chatty, so I thought nothing of it. He was being friendly. Throughout our conversations, he's holding my hand every now and then. I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable, but I shrug it off. But he progresses. He placed my hand on his thigh, holding it tight in his hand. I move over on my seat away from him, but he keeps my hand there. I turn around and see the stepsister and she mouths, "Are you okay?" I nod because the man has now let go of my hand. I see the stepsister whisper something to my boyfriend, and they go quiet for a minute. Seeing as he let go, the conversation continues. I can see that we are getting closer to our hotel, and I'm wishing for us just to be there quickly. The man takes my hand again. This time he places it on my thigh, his hand holding mine tightly. I am feeling very vulnerable at this point. I'm wearing a short, tight vest dress, and I immediately clamp my legs together. I'm now silent. I froze. My boyfriend notices and says, "Hey mate, take your hands off her now." The man laughs and says, "Friendly, I'm being friendly." He continues keeping his hand on my thigh. At this point, my boyfriend and his stepsister are saying, "Stop it, pull over." But he says that we are close to the hotel now. I feel sick. the alcohol creeping up my stomach and throat. The man is still holding my hand and he moves it further up my thigh. I'm completely stiff at this point, knowing that if I let my legs relax even in the slightest, things would escalate. But they did anyway. He guided my hand up and with one of his fingers, he touched me. I don't need to say where because you already know. I stare at the window and I'm begging for the car to stop. And luckily it does. I jump out of the car and my boyfriend and the stepsister are looking at me. He touched me, I say. My boyfriend races over to the driver's window, shouting and screaming at him, but the man speeds off very fast. And as he does, my boyfriend kicks his license plate and we see a dent. We go back into the hotel and needless to say, I drink more. And the next morning, we are going on a boat trip and my boyfriend's family are asking me if I'm okay, after hearing about what had happened. I say yes because it's true. It's over now and it could have gone a lot worse, and I hope that I'll never see him again. We leave the hotel lobby and that's when I see them. Taxis, white, yellow taxi signs on top of them. Pulled in the taxi ranks, I head over to one. "Excuse me," I say to a taxi man. "Are all taxis white here?" "Yes," he says. "Only taxi colors are white with the sign on top." I feel my insides churning. So, let me reiterate this. A 50-year-old man thought me, a 17-year-old, was alone, and pretended to be a taxi service to get me in his car. So, I was about 13 at the time this happened. It was coming up for my mom's birthday and I had no idea what to get her, so I called my aunt for help. We agreed to meet in town on a Saturday afternoon, after my piano lesson so we wouldn't have to rush. I went to my piano lesson as usual, dropped my books back at the house and went to the bus stop to get the bus into town. As I was waiting, a taxi pulled up and the driver rolled down the window and called out, "Are you going to town, huh? I'll give you a lift." Without moving closer to the taxi, I replied that I couldn't afford one, and the bus would be there any minute. It was, as usual, running late. The driver became insistent that I get into his taxi, and that he wouldn't charge me to go into town. I stood my ground, refusing to get in. His tone became more and more aggressive as he demanded that I get into his taxi over the next minute or so. Someone else arrived at the bus stop, and the taxi driver sped off, swearing at me for not getting into the taxi. I told my aunt what happened when I met her in town, and she asked if I had his license number so she could report the incident. I explained that I didn't want to move closer to the taxi to get the number, and that at first I thought that he was just looking for a fare. My aunt is pretty sure that if I would have gotten into that taxi, I wouldn't have been dropped off in town, but taken somewhere and told me next time this happened to tell them to get lost or I'll scream, and if they try to approach me, to run. I was living in Abu Dhabi when this happened and I was 17 years old at the time. I have had a number of experiences from taxi drivers out there that could fit on this sub, but this one was by far the worst and creepiest and I would like to share it all with you. It was Boxing Day 2012 and I was going to my friend's house for his Boxing Day party. He lived in a compound that was a bit of a drive off the island itself. And although not rural suburbs by most standards, this area could be classed as such. These residential suburbs were also still mostly in development. Every block had a new building site, plenty of empty shells of houses, no security cameras at the time, etc. There were no pavements either, just rubble sand patches split by tarmac roads. Now, taxis in the UAE are crazy common. You just put your hand out and one will pull up. And back then, there was less security. There were no cameras or mics in the car, just the meter. I hailed the cab and sat in the front, as a result of a past experience that I had, and we were set on our way. Things start normally. We talked as I normally would getting into a cab. How long have you lived here? Do you enjoy the place, etc.? Eventually, we're on the highway, and after we cross the water to the mainland, he pulls over on the hard shoulder and, without saying a word to me, pulls out his phone and he calls someone. He speaks his native language and he's of South Asian descent, so I have no clue what he's saying. But I ask him politely to continue driving as the meter is still on. He nods, hangs up, and gets going again. This happens a second time, again without word or warning, and now I'm suspicious. This time, I ask him again to keep going, but he ignores me, and he keeps talking on the phone. We're on the highway, so I can't get out for the fear of going splat, not being able to hail a cab or being jacked for jaywalking. After a few minutes, he gets going again, and we pull off the highway, still heading the direction that I needed to be. We reach the first roundabout where we need to make a right turn, but he goes straight over. Everyone knows where this compound is. It's the biggest one in the city. And as a cab driver, there's no chance he doesn't know how to get there. So now, I'm even more suspicious and I kinda have a feeling of trepidation. Like I know this vibe and what might be happening. I ask him to turn around at the next roundabout, but he ignores me. Now, I'm getting agitated and angry, and I ask him to just stop the car and I'll get out and walk. Nope. He literally just ignored me and kept focusing on the road. At this point, I'm shouting at him, numerous expletives, etc., and it's clear that he's got something else planned. Eventually, he pulls off the main road onto a dirt track that led a couple of 100 yards into a massive building site, and he keeps driving down it. He then turns to me and tells me to get into the back seat, and repeats this in an increasingly forceful manner, to the point where we're shouting at each other. At the end of the dirt track is an old little minibus, with roughly 5 dudes stood next to it. I don't notice this immediately. All I care about is that the car is stopped and I'm in the front so I can get out. I'm not let in. Inexplicably, I threw some money at him and jumped out of the car with my bag and started walking away, jogging back down the track. I can only imagine that the earlier phone calls he made were to these minibus men, as when I started getting away, they jumped in the minibus and drove down to catch me, as the taxi turned around to do the same. They all pulled up in front of me like police do in the movies when they stop a bank robber and jump out. The taxi driver runs right up to me, grabs me, and screams at point blank in my face to get in the bus. I can still smell and feel the damp heat from his breath as it touched my face, and the little bits of spit hitting my cheeks. This honestly just enraged me, so I grabbed him by the throat and I pushed him into the car. I screamed something back at him, I can't remember what, and I let go. They all get their phones out and start calling and messaging and moving towards me, so I got out of there as quickly as I could, ran all the way down and back onto the main road, and went to my mates on foot. I know I should have taken their number plate, their ID number, etc., called the police even when I was in the cab, let alone after it happened. However, I was a 17-year-old with a bag of Jack Daniels in my bag, on the way to a party with all my mates drinking, in a country with a drinking age of 21. The paranoia of the trouble from that was enough to keep it quiet from the authorities, although I did tell every family member and friend. So, this happened around 9 years ago when I was 11. There was a girl at school called Amy who didn't have many friends. She was very quiet and honestly, I thought she was a bit strange, but I felt like it would be nice to befriend her. We got talking and she actually turned out to be really nice and we became best friends rather quickly. I got to the point where I spent every weekend at her house and then we would walk to school together. Even at my age, I knew there was something wrong with her dad, Kevin. He was very interested in me, it seems, and always tried to play fight and stuff, which is weird in and of itself. Whenever he was around, I felt weird. He was a short, fat man with gray and white hair. Always had a weird smirk on his face and really wide eyes. It started off with stealing bits of my food when I wasn't looking, and then laughing and making sure to put his arms around my shoulders to apologize. He would always be wherever we were, upstairs, downstairs, or in the garden. He would always lurk about. There was a day where Amy's nan was visiting, Amy's mother's mom, and Kevin kissed her nan on the mouth hello, which was weird. Anyway, but then it turned into the creepiest, sloppiest French kiss. Everyone except me and Amy found it funny. She put on a smile when her family looked over, but I was horrified. Maybe I shouldn't have gone back, but I felt like I had to for Amy. After that, there was a day we were playing in her room and Kevin came in and started an argument over nothing. It got heated and he grabbed the rubbish bag, saying that he was going to throw all of her toys away. Of course, an 11-year-old is going to go mad if they think their dolls are being thrown away, so she was hysterical. We followed him downstairs, where he told her if she spoke to him like that again, she would regret it. It was then that he started to remove his belt. She pushed me towards their front door, which is just in front of the stairs, so we could run out of it. But she was sort of half laughing as if she was trying to convince me it wasn't serious. I could tell that it was. I got to the door, but when I turned around and waited, Kevin slammed it shut. But not the porch door, and then all I heard was Amy screaming at the top of her lungs. I was so scared, but I didn't want to leave her. I just stood there. Eventually, I found the courage to go back in, and I went upstairs to Amy, who was brushing her doll's hair. She smiled at me, but she had a tear-stained face. There were no visible marks, but all that I could see were her arms, so he could have hit her anywhere. I then felt as if I had to protect her, so I continued going there and I didn't tell my mom a thing. One night, I woke up thirsty and we were close enough for me to go just get myself a drink. So I went downstairs and Kevin was laying there on the floor, in the dark with nothing but tidy whities on, and he just stared at me. It was the creepiest thing. Just the street lamp from outside shining through a gap in the blind lit up the room enough to see. I didn't get myself a drink, I just ran back upstairs. I wouldn't go there after that until I knew for sure he wouldn't be there. And I didn't sleep over anymore. I'm not sure if I've ever told my mom, but I think she would go and kill him. I was talking to Amy recently, and she had opened up to me because she had sent me her mental health assessment sheet. When she was 10, she woke up to Kevin doing something bad to her 15-year-old sister. Kevin isn't her sister's dad, not that it makes it any better, who was screaming for Amy. It also stated that he hit her on a regular basis. The most recent was 2 years ago. He beat her up in front of a friend, and her friend called the cops. I told her the things that I had seen and how I knew something wasn't right. All I know of him now is that he's in a hospital suffering with COPD, and I couldn't care less.